story here about Noam Chomsky and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I've been covering this development that has been happening in reference to Jeffrey Epstein. We've been covering the connection that he had between JP Morgan, the connection that he had with politicians, his involvement in the Virgin Islands. And now there have been more recent developments that have emerged. Now, when I saw this on the Wall Street Journal, I said, oh, okay, some of his connections include CIA, totally get it. A Rothschild, totally get it. And then someone's name appeared that I did not expect to see, and that was Noam Chomsky. Let's get into this clip here from News Nation.
First tonight, the new questions we need to be asking about Jeffrey Epstein, because nobody else really is asking these questions. And when you do ask, you don't get answers. When you don't get answers, keep asking. He had effectively a double life, and we know very little about the bigger part of his life. We're not talking about the sex part here. The Wall Street Journal just reported that after Epstein's conviction on sex charges, schedules show meetings planned with William Burns, director of the CIA. Since 2021, he had 3 scheduled meetings with Epstein starting in 2014 when he's Deputy Secretary of State. Why is a Deputy Secretary of State meeting with a guy who had pleaded guilty to sex crimes involving minors? Catherine Rumlow,
I'm going to tell you why in a second.
A White House counsel under President Barack Obama, had dozens of meetings with Epstein in the years after her service in the White House. Leon Botstein, the president of Bard College, invited Epstein, who brought a group of young female guests to the campus. Noam Chomsky, professor, author, and political activist, was scheduled to fly with Epstein to have dinner at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2015. We don't know which of these meetings took place. We do know they were scheduled. That's what the Wall Street Journal.
Now, I want to pause here for a second. Woody Allen's name is also here, so you can see Woody Allen's picture. He didn't mention his name, so I wanted to mention it for you. But some of these people make sense. Now, he's wondering, like, why would a CIA official, why would Ariane Rothschild, CEO, banker, like, why would these people meet with him? By the way, this was after he was convicted, not before. So I'm going to tell you why. And then we're going to get to the Noam Chomsky part. Blackmail. I seriously believe, based on the information that I've read, I believe that Jeffrey Epstein had a lot of dirt on these people, whether they had been to that island that he had, or it just could have been other information that he had on them that they did not want the public to find out. Remember, they said he had several tapes as well. I really believe that he had something on most of these people. Now, you have Jeffrey Epstein, who was in the mix with the CIA. This guy was protected by the government. Remember, when he was convicted, that was not the first time authorities showed up to his place. You have to remember that he had been reported prior to. They showed up at his house in Palm Springs. Maybe it was Palm Springs. They showed up at his house in Palm Springs, searched the house. He was let go. Okay, was not the first time. You mean to tell me that if he was entangled with the CIA, you mean to tell me none of these government officials knew what was going on with this guy? I don't buy that one bit. Let's go on. There's so much more to show you.
Found Ariane de Rothschild, who's now chief executive of the Swiss private bank Edmond de Rothschild Group, had more than a dozen meetings with Epstein. Epstein scheduled more than a dozen meetings from 2013 to 2017 with Joshua Cooper Ramo, who at the time served on the board of Starbucks and FedEx. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak was reportedly a regular guest at Epstein's meetings. Epstein was scheduled to have dinner with them and movie director Woody Allen and his wife. Why? Sure, there are the...
Now, you have to remember some things about Woody Allen, too. Woody Allen, his wife, if he's still married to her, I have to look this up, but Woody Allen married his adopted daughter. It's really weird. Like they had a relationship. The relationship started when she was a teenager. So it makes sense that Woody Allen would be hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, man.
Accusations of sex with underage girls and the massages and all the sickening sex stuff that surrounded Jeffrey Epstein. That's largely been adjudicated. Nearly 24 of those women shared their stories in court after he died. But we know shockingly little about why the most powerful names in the world, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, Kevin Spacey, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and so many others.
Here's the web of connections. Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Saudi Crown Prince, Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, Kevin Spacey. Let me take the captions off so you can see. Kevin Spacey. You have Lex Wexner. You have Jess Staley, former Barclays CEO, former L Brand CEO, John P. DeJohnette, former U.S. Virgin Islands government. This guy was connected to very powerful people. Let's not forget, Kevin Spacey was actually accused of sexual assault here in Massachusetts over an incident that the accuser alleged happened at Martha's Vineyard. He was a teenage boy. So some of these people you expected to see, and you ask, where the hell does Noam Chomsky fit on this list?
Hung out with a relatively small potatoes money manager who appeared to enjoy the company of underage women. We still know very little about why people trusted him to manage their money, or why even after his sexual deviance became public.
Blackmail. It's not even about whether they trusted him. Blackmail. You let me manage your accounts. You let me manage this money for you. You can choose not to, but if not, I have this information on you that I can release at any time. Blackmail. That's the answer.
The rich and powerful felt the need to meet with him. Alan Dershowitz defended Epstein in that 2008 case that resulted in a year jail sentence. Epstein was originally accused of sexually abusing girls as young as 14, pleading guilty to a much lesser charge. But after that, think about that. After he pled guilty to being involved in some really unsavory activities, the world's most powerful and influential people couldn't get enough of Jeffrey Epstein. Alan Dershowitz joins us now, famed Harvard law professor and criminal defense attorney. It's good to see you, sir. I appreciate it.
This is the gentleman that Kim Iverson interviewed, and he said he wouldn't come back on because she asked him questions about Jeffrey Epstein. Apparently, he didn't want to answer those questions. Remember, Kim said that they reached out to her. She didn't reach out to them for the interview, but here he is ready to answer questions. Make it make sense.
What is the power that Epstein had that got so many people to check their better judgment at the door?
Blackmail. But listen to what Alan says.
Well, I think a number of factors. Before he pleaded guilty, which is when I knew him, nobody knew, as far as I know, nobody knew he had this secret life. The president of Harvard, many, many other people. He had seminars with Nobel Prize winners. They were interesting, and he was an interesting guy.
Nobody knew he had this secret life. There were other people flown to the island. There were other people flown to the island. You really expect me to believe that none of those people, no one, and this is not to say that Noam Chomsky did, but I'm saying you expect me to believe that none of these people that were friends with Jeffrey Epstein, who flew, especially ones who flew to the island, you mean tell me none of these people knew? If that's the case, why haven't they released the Black Book of Names? Why haven't they released the names? Ghislaine Maxwell, she's just a pawn. She was just a pawn. She was not the real catch here. The real catch is releasing the names. And that has not happened.
Some people, I think, were attracted to him because of his intellect, because of his charm. I think he had some things over some other people. I think he had some extortion over some people. I think some people may have come to him not for his great financial advice. I never thought he was that good financially. I never took financial advice from him. And I suspect there were people over whom he had something involving the sex stuff. Now,
it's called blackmail. I'm sorry, but he doesn't want to say the word, but I'll say it. So we're going to move on to another clip here. And this one is from Joe Rogan, because people are asking, like, why would Noam Chomsky, why would he want to, be associated with someone like Jeffrey Epstein? Or why would Jeffrey Epstein want to be associated with people who are scientists? So I worked at MIT, and I actually agree with what this gentleman is going to say on Joe Rogan's show, why he went to that level.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
I guess this is an opportunity to bring up Jeff Epstein. So, people sometimes wonder, like we're scientists, hanging out with him to get with these young women or something. I know scientists. There are some scientists like that. They were spending time with him because he was giving their laboratories money that they didn't have to write grants for.
Why was he doing that, though?
Oh, there are very strong opinions. I never met him. I know people who knew him. But he clearly understood social engineering. He understood that rich people they can get anything they want. Anything they want.
Yep.
Except the one thing they can't easily control is their reputation, because that requires other people's perceptions. And just being rich doesn't make you necessarily respected. By certain people,
That's
yes.
right.
By certain people, no. So he understood that very wealthy people feel more important and can derive more sense of self-respect when they're surrounded by brilliant people.
That piece right there. And this is especially true. People are going to take you more seriously if you're friends with people who are scientists, who are physicists. I worked at MIT. Some of the most brilliant people in the world teach at MIT. And when he mentioned the grants, when he mentioned Jeffrey Epstein giving them money for their labs and their research, it all goes back to the money, people. It makes sense. Listen, you only get so much money from these grants each year. I know this. I've seen this. There's the NIH grants that the government gives out. Like, you only get so much money. And eventually, if you want to continue your research, this is where the donors come in, right? So Jeffrey Epstein has made contributions to MIT. The president of MIT actually made a statement after he was convicted saying he was donating to MIT, but he was considered an anonymous donor. And there are several of those people who don't want to be named. But just because he was giving donations to the university doesn't also mean he wasn't giving donations to people for their research. Now, what's particularly interesting in reference to Noam Chomsky is that Noam Chomsky claims for him, that is actually not the case, that he did not receive money from Jeffrey Epstein. So then what was it really all about? You see, the Washington Journal, they published this article. And this was the bombshell that dropped the other day that had a lot of leftists kind of like cringing. Epstein's private calendar reveals prominent names, including CIA chief, Goldman's top lawyer. So if we go on here, because you could see the pictures at the top, and this is one that caught me. I saw Noam Chomsky and I'm like, why is Noam Chomsky here? So I want to go to the part that's about Noam in particular. Like I said, the other people to me was not a surprise. It's not a surprise to me that he would be connected to someone from the CIA or anything like that. What was a little strange was Noam Chomsky. Now, it says here, most of the people told the Journal they visited Epstein for reasons related to his wealth and connections. Like I said, it always goes back to the money. Several said they thought he had served his time and had rehabilitated himself. Mr. Botstein said he was trying to get Epstein to donate to his school. Again, money. Mr. Chomsky said he and Epstein discussed political and academic topics. Okay. This guy was mega rich. You can discuss political and academic topics with a number of people. I don't believe that was the only reason why they were connected. I'm sorry, but I don't buy that. So it talks about his connections to the CIA, the former CIA agent. And then it goes into this piece here. This is a long article, by the way. That's why we're just going to skip to the Noam Chomsky part. Let me just fast forward here. Of course, this part's like towards the bottom. Rothschild, she also met with him again after he was convicted. And that's the piece I want people to hold on to. It's not just about meeting with him. It's the fact that they were willing to meet with him after his conviction. That's the part that's a little strange. So there's Ramo Chomsky. Mr. Barack also met Epstein in 2015 with Mr. Chomsky, now 94, a linguistics professor and political activist who has been critical of capitalism and U.S. foreign policy. Mr. Chomsky said Epstein arranged the meeting with Mr. Barack for them to discuss Israel's policies with regard to Palestinian issues in the international arena. Interesting. Mr. Barack said he often met with Epstein on trips to New York and was introduced to people such as Mr. Ramo and Mr. Chomsky to discuss geopolitics or other topics. He often brought other interesting persons from art, culture, law, science, finance, diplomacy, or philanthropy, Mr. Barack said. So it goes on here to say Epstein arranged several meetings in 2015 and 2016 with Mr. Chomsky while he was a professor at MIT. So at that point, 2015, was I still at MIT at that point? I think I was still at MIT at that point. So this is actually when Noam Chomsky was still employed at MIT, is when they were meeting. Okay. When asked about his relationship with Epstein, Mr. Chomsky replied in an email. First response is that it is none of your business or anyone's. Second is that I knew him and we met occasionally. You see, this is the same kind of line that Bill Gates tried to give, which is just like, oh, we met, like we had dinner like once or twice. But Bill Gates' ex-wife actually said they were friends. And with your friends, you don't meet someone just once. So it's almost like they're trying to make it seem like they weren't as close to him as people would think. But they met more than once. They met a couple of times. In March 2015, Epstein scheduled a gathering with Mr. Chomsky and Harvard University professor Martin Nowak and other academics, according to documents. Mr. Chomsky said they had several meetings at Mr. Nowak's Research Institute to discuss neuroscience and other topics. 2 months later, Epstein planned to fly with Mr. Chomsky and his wife to have dinner with them and movie director Woody Allen and his wife, Soon Yi. Why was Noam Chomsky? This is an odd bunch, right? Woody Allen? Interesting. Now he goes on to say, if there was a flight, which I doubt, it would have been from Boston to New York, 30 minutes. I'm unaware of the principle that requires that I inform you about an evening spent with a great artist. Do you guys see a problem with his statement? This is Noam Chomsky's statement. First, he says, I didn't know I needed to tell you about this. I don't need to inform you about this. But given the fact of what Epstein was convicted of, and you met with him after he was convicted, why can't you talk about it? What is there that you're trying to hide? Epstein donated at least $850,000 to MIT between 2002 and 2017, and more than $9.1 million to Harvard from 1998 to 2008. The schools have said. In 2021, Harvard said it was sanctioning Mr. Nowak for violating university policies in his dealings with Epstein and was shutting a research center he ran that Epstein had funded. MIT said it was inappropriate to accept Epstein's gifts and that it later donated $850,000 to nonprofits supporting survivors of sexual abuse. In 2020 interview with the Dunk Tank podcast, Mr. Chomsky said that people he considered worse than Epstein had donated to MIT. He didn't mention any of his meetings with Epstein. So what have those people done? This is concerning. Mr. Chomsky told the Journal that at the time of his meeting, what was known about Jeffrey Epstein was that he had been convicted of a crime and had served his sentence. According to U.S. laws and norms, that yields a clean slate. My God. Out of all the people that you could have chosen to do business with, MIT said lawyers investigating its ties to Epstein didn't find that Mr. Chomsky met with Epstein on its campus or received funding from him. Harvard declined to comment beyond the report it published on its Epstein ties in 2020. So I'm going to say this, and then we have this video here that I also want to play because Fox News also talked about this. Max Blumenthal said at approximately the same time Noam Chomsky was wagging his finger at the Palestinian-led BDS movement, he was meeting privately with Barak, among the worst war criminals in Israeli history. The meetings were brokered by Jeffrey Epstein. Look at this. Noam Chomsky, Israel boycott campaign risk backfiring, says Noam Chomsky. And then this screenshot here, this is where Max posts a screenshot from that Wall Street Journal article. And it talks about how he met with Barak. And it said here, Mr. Chomsky said Epstein arranged the meeting for them to discuss Israel's policies with regard to Palestinian issues in the international arena, which I just mentioned to you. So, this is not to say, here's what we know and what we don't know. We don't know if Noam Chomsky went to that island. We don't know if he participated in any of those acts or if he knew about those acts. But what we do know is that this is somewhat suspect. Never mentioned this. Never mentioned it. It's kind of odd. And then this relationship here, which Max Blumenthal brought up, which I think is very concerning. Let me come out of this so you can see it. This piece here. Noam Chomsky, when he was wagging his finger at the Palestinian-led BDS movement, he was over here meeting with Barak, one of the worst war criminals in Israeli history. So this goes into, thank you so much for this. I was going to say this goes into some of the claims that people have made that Epstein was working with Mossad. So I have to say this. Who is Noam Chomsky? I know some people aren't happy to hear this news. I saw leftist meltdown on Twitter when this was reported. But this is why I tell you not to hero worship people. This is why I tell you not to put people on a pedestal. And I know a lot of people love Noam Chomsky. And they didn't take this news too well. So we don't know how much he was involved in reference to what Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of. We don't know right now. What we do know is that that black book of names has still not been released. And we know that he did have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And had this article not reported this, we probably would have never known. That's just something to think about. The Oracle says sex, big money, and power always make strange bedfellows. Thank you for the super chat, Steve. Sabby, is there anyone who didn't meet with Epstein? Me. I'm sorry, me. And thank you for the super chat, Fire Faye. Have you thought about having Whitney Webb on your show, Miss Sabby? I bet she'd sit down for a chat with you. Love your work, by the way. Yes, I would love to have Whitney on. I need to actually work on that.